Today I'm going to introduce to you an app called GeoGebra. So we're just going to play around a little bit, make sure you know how to get it set up, learn some of the tools, and make sure you can save a file and then submit it as an assignment. So the first thing you're going to need to do is go into self-service and look for GeoGebra Classic. So let's move that there, self-service. Scroll through, it's alphabetical, look for G, and there it is. It's got kind of like a ring with 4 purple dots around it, GeoGebra Classic. So you want to go ahead and install that. And then once you have it installed, go ahead and run the app. Now, it's important when you start off, there's lots of stuff going on here. I've got an input box on the left, I've got a graph grid on the right, I've got a little menu above that, and I've got a keyboard at the bottom. So, at least for now, we would just want to look at a blank white sketch, and we want to create objects on it, like points and lines and segments and angles. So, when this box comes up and you have your choice, it says graphing, geometry, 3D graphics, CAS, spreadsheet, probability. Always go into where it says geometry. And you have to wait for a second, because if you try and click too quickly, that menu moves a little bit and then you get into some bizarre stuff. So I'm going to click geometry, and now I just have a white sketch in front of me. If you have the graph and the keyboard and some of that other stuff, you might just want to delete or swipe off the app, close it out, and then reopen it again, and make sure you choose geometry. Now, up along the top row, there we go, up along the top row, we have our tools. And each one of those tools actually has several tools within it. So on the far left, when I click that arrow tool, it shows me what other tools are there. So predominantly, we're going to use the first tool where it says move, and we're going to use the arrow tool to drag things around the screen. And then it has a freehand shape and a pen. Now the pen will come in handy once in a while. For example, if you need to put your name on some work, you can write it by hand, and that works nicely. You also, now's a good time to show you, over on the right side near the top, there's a backward looping arrow, and you can hit that if you make mistakes and you want to undo the last thing you've done. So I just undid what I wrote. So I'm going to go back and choose that first tool again and pick move. So we just have the arrow tool. Now on the other end of those tools, the second from the last, where it says A equals 2, there's a whole bunch of tools there, and the important one to use is the text tool, the second one down. And instead of writing your name freestyle by hand, it's better sometimes to use the text tool. And when you select that, you can type in your name. And that reminds me as well, and I can say OK, and there it is. And you can change the size. Now see, I'm going to go back to the arrow tool to move it, and I can move it anywhere around the screen I want. It's important to understand now, by the way, if you're trying to type at any point during this, when you're trying to type something, if your keyboard does not come up, that seems to be a flaw in GeoGebra, and you can try either just closing out the program and then reopening it and see if you can get the keyboard back on. Or the only other option I've found is that you actually have to delete the app off your iPad and reinstall it. So hopefully you don't run into that issue. One of the other things I'd like to do is the last tool in the toolbox has a delete button, and I can use that to delete stuff. So I choose the delete, and then I go ahead and tap on what I want to delete, and it goes away. All right, so those are some of the basics. Now let's look at these tools. And before I create stuff, there's default settings where your font size is a certain amount or your decimal rounding is a certain amount. So in general, I'd always like you to go into settings right off the bat before you're creating something in GeoGebra and you save it and submit it to me. So over in the top right-hand corner, those 3 bars, if you click on those, This is where we're able to save stuff, open files, we can share, download, export, etc. If you look all the way down, fourth from the bottom, it says Settings. And in Settings, I'd like you to make rounding 1 decimal place. And then for font size, I'd like you to make that at least 24. Otherwise it gets a little too small to see, especially when we start doing a lot of stuff on our screen. So let's go at least 24 there, and then you can click Save Settings, and it doesn't seem like anything happens. And then in the upper right corner where that X is, you can click the X, and now you're good to go. All right, so the first tool I want to introduce is the Point tool, and that's the second tool from the left. And quite often we'll use Intersect, or we'll do Point on Object, but for now we just want to select the first thing, which is Point. And then on your screen, just tap anywhere, and it should create a point, and it'll give it a letter. And that's the way we label points, or with 1 capital letter, so that's consistent with what we've been doing. And then you could do another point, and another point. So I've got 3 different points. Now I'd like to move those around. You always have to remember, go back to the arrow tool. So I'm going to go back to the first tool there, the arrow tool. And by the way, if you don't select Move, and then you just try and grab something, it defaults to that arrow tool because that's what it was on. So I can grab point A and drag it around the screen and put it anywhere I want. And then point B. So go ahead and move these around so they're kind of in the shape of a triangle. Now the other thing you can do, instead of grabbing the point, you can actually move the letter a little bit. So if you hover over the letter and then grab it, you can drag and move it. Now it only will move a certain distance away from that point. You can't drag it all the way across the screen because it's really connected to that point. But sometimes it helps to move these so they're out of the way when you start drawing other stuff in your picture. Now let's say, for example, I didn't want it to be ABC, I wanted it to be ABE. So we can fix that as well. With our arrow tool, if I hold down on the point, you'll notice we get a little sub-menu, and you have to hold down for a second in order for this to show up. It's not just tapping it. Now, there's some things there. Show Object, and you see there's a check mark there. If you clicked Show Object, now it's going to disappear. So it's still there, but you can't see it, and that's not very useful. They have a Show Label, and it's checked right now. If I click that, now it won't show the label point C. It'll just show the point, but not the letter. Sometimes that'll be useful. People a lot of times accidentally click Show Trace, and we don't want to do that. Later on, we'll do some more interesting things with that. But what I want to do is go down to Settings. So I'm going to click on Settings. And you can do all kinds of things. You can change the color, the style of the point, making it thinner or thicker, etc. But over in the basic settings here, where it has the name and C, I can click on that box, and then I can backspace, and I want to use a capital letter. So notice, by the way, on the keyboard, we actually have 4 keyboards. Right now it has the 1, 2, 3 keyboard. There's a function keyboard, and then there's the alphabet, ABC, and then the Greek letters, alpha, beta, gamma, etc. So you want to make sure that you're on the ABC keyboard, and you want to hit Shift because we only use capital letters for points, and then you want to type E, and then that's all you need to do. Now in the upper, you can close out the keyboard if you want, in the upper right corner of the settings box, we can click that X again to close that out. And now as you can see, we've renamed that point as E instead of C. So once again, you highlight the point, or the label actually, and you click Settings, and you go to the name box, and that's where you can change it. Okay, let's look at some other tools. Let's go to the third tool, and when you click on that, you can see we can make either lines or segments with given length, etc., arrays, vectors. So I'd like to make a segment. So I want to choose the segment option. And now at the bottom, it always gives you some help. And it says select 2 points. And actually, I'll do that again. think you missed it on my screen. If I slide this up, there you can see it. Okay, so it gives you a little hint at the bottom. So with this segment tool, I'm going to click on the point A, it's highlighted now, and then the point B, and it makes a segment between them. Now, my segment tool is still highlighted, so I'd also like to make a segment from B to E. So I'll click point B again, and then E, and then I want to make a third one from A over to E. So I'll click A and then E, and now I've made a triangle. Now, what would have happened if I did the line tool instead? Well, let me show you that. If I chose line and then clicked A and B, notice the line goes on forever and ever and ever. So it looks like it keeps going off my screen in both directions. But I didn't want to make this line, so I'm going to hit that back looping arrow in the upper right corner to undo that. So if you ever make a mistake, that undo button is very, very helpful. Okay, so now let's go back to the arrow tool at the top and grab one of the points and move them. Now, you should be doing this while you're watching so you can practice instead of trying to remember everything all at once. All right, so I've got my triangle, I can move it around. You can actually grab one of the sides instead of one of the points. And now you've got your bouncing triangle. Okay. And when you grab a point, you can make it dance. All right. One of the other things I'd like to do is, oh, by the way, let me mention this. The 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth tool over, the polygon tool, sometimes people use that to make a triangle or a rectangle or whatever. And for now, please do not use that tool. We'll get to a point where we use it. But for now, I want you to make a triangle the way that I just showed you. We can also do circles. And we can do some conic sections. And then we get to the one of the more important tools, and this is your measuring tool. So it's fourth from the right along the top. And we have an angle, we can measure an angle or distance, and those are the ones we use the most often. So the first or the third choice. So I'd like to choose the third one, distance or length, and click on that. Now, there's two ways I could measure segment AB. I could click on the segment between A and B, and that just gives me a measurement, 8.2. And that's fine. But if I'm still on the same measuring tool, if I clicked on A and then B, and let me undo that because I didn't like that. Let's try that again, distance. If I pick point A and then point B, notice the difference. I'm going to go grab my arrow tool and move this. So when I click on 2 points to measure a segment, it actually uses the notation that we use in geometry. It has the 2 capital letters, there's no bar over it, and that means the distance from A to B is 8.2. When you just click on the segment, it doesn't tell you what that 8.2 refers to. And then you can move it around a little bit, and you can see how if I moved it there, you wouldn't be sure what's 8.2. But if I move this measurement around, it doesn't matter. You know what it's talking about. So please, when you're going to measure distance or length, click on the 2 points. Don't click on segments. So I'm going to delete this point. Oops, undo. And notice, I'm still on the arrow tool here. I showed you the delete tool over here at the end on the right. But with the arrow tool, if I hold down on that 8.2, oh no, that'll actually delete the segment, so I don't want to do that. So let me use this delete. No. Let's try that again. Let's go hold down on 8.2. And there. I clicked on the show label, and that got rid of it for me. All right, because I don't want to delete the segment. So now we can measure from A to B. You could also measure from B to E, and you can measure from A to E. And then we could also measure angles. And this is the tricky part. Let's say I want to measure angle B. So I'm going to go back to my measuring tool, and I'm going to choose the first one, angle. And now it says that I have to, I'll show this, select 3 points or 2 lines. So just like we did with segments, I want you to select points to measure angle B, but you need to select 3 points for this app. So, and if I want to measure angle B, I want to select B second. So I'm going to either click on A, then B, and then E, or I'm going to click on E, and then B, and then A. So let me click on, I'll do A, you can see it's highlighted, and then B, and then E. And notice, I'll go back to my arrow tool, I can move that measurement around. So that angle is 92 degrees. And you'll see it gives it a little letter A, don't worry so much about that. So, but that angle B is 92 degrees. Now, what if I had done it the other way? So let me go back, angle. What if I had clicked on E and then B and then A? E, B, A. Notice here, let me undo the 92. E, B, A. This gives me the longer way around for angle B. That reflex angle that I talked about a few days ago in our notes. We don't want the reflex angle, 268 degrees. So when you're trying to measure an angle, you have to click on 3 points. The vertex has to be the second point you click on. But if it measures the long way around, you hit that undo button on the upper top right, and then just click on it in the opposite order. So instead of EBA, I do ABE, and now that gives me it the correct way. So you want to make sure that you're measuring the smaller angle inside, not the long way around angle. All right, now with the arrow tool, watch what happens when I move point A. Notice my measurements are automatically being updated, and that's the power of this program. So I can create all kinds of scenarios, and then I can look and see what happens when I make things bigger or smaller or move them up or down or right or left. And we can start to make some conjectures about what seems to be true with geometric objects. And we're going to be doing a lot of that. So you want to create something, but then you want to be able to move and see how the measurements change as you move things. All right, so your first assignment is to create an exact triangle like mine and label it ABE. And I want you to measure all 3 of the sides. I've just measured 1, but I want all 3 of the sides measured. And then I want you to measure all 3 of the angles. And lastly, you need to use the text tool, and you need to type your name. Put my name here. Click OK, grab my arrow tool, and put your name somewhere in the corner. And now you're ready to save it. So now in the upper right corner at the top, the 3 horizontal lines, when you click on that, I want you to click Save. And it seems like nothing happens. Be patient. It takes a couple of seconds, and then this screen comes up. And it wants you to create a GeoGebra account. Do not create a GeoGebra account. You can, I guess, but you don't have to. So I'll say that one more time. You do not have to fill in this information. Down below the box, it says continue without signing in. That's what you want to select. And then you need to give it a name. So let's call this Project 1. Project space and the number 1. And then you click Save. And now you've got it saved in case there's a problem uploading and submitting this. Now you're ready to submit this as your assignment in Schoology. So once again, click in the upper right-hand corner. And this time you want to click Share, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th thing down, Share. And then you can scroll until you see Schoology, and you select that, and it'll open Schoology up. And then you submit to assignment, and just like you do your homework, etc., etc. So I'll stop there.